parents missed my graduation, but remembered to bill me for my sister's Vegas Bachelorette weekend. $2,740 your share for flights plus suite. I sent back $2.74 with the note. Didn't gamble. Not paying. Then froze the shared card, flagged every charge, and revoked all linked accounts. By morning, I got a notice. All guest access removed by account owner. At 9:13 a.m., my brother texted, "The hotel won't let us in. What did you do?" The strange thing was that I had spent graduation day trying very hard not to feel sorry for myself. My name was Brianna Carter, and when I crossed that stage, nearly every graduate before me had been greeted by screaming parents, siblings waving bouquets, grandparents recording vertically on trembling phones. Then my name was called. My friends exploded from 3 different rows because they knew exactly what was missing. They yelled, whistled, and embarrassed me so thoroughly that I laughed while receiving my diploma. But when I looked toward the seat I had reserved for my parents, the chair was empty. Their absence felt louder than everyone else's applause. I had known for 3 days that they were not coming. Mom had called while I was ironing my graduation dress and explained that Erica's Vegas weekend had become more complicated than expected. Flights were booked. Deposits were non-refundable. Everyone had coordinated schedules. "It's only the ceremony, sweetheart," she told me. "We're still incredibly proud of you." I remember staring at the iron in my hand and thinking how perfectly that sentence summarized my place in the family. Erica received celebrations. Ryan received rescuing. I received assurances that whatever mattered to me wasn't actually that important. After the ceremony, my friends dragged me to a bar that offered free drinks to graduates. I still had my gown on because someone had spilled champagne near my car and I hadn't bothered changing. We laughed, took pictures, and toasted until my cheeks hurt from pretending the empty chair had stopped mattering. One friend raised his glass and said, "To Bri, the only person here who apparently graduated with an entire replacement family." Everyone laughed. So did I. And maybe that was why the payment request felt so obscene when it appeared 20 minutes later while I was waiting for my ride. Dad's note beneath the request was almost cheerful. "Erica's Vegas weekend, your portion." I opened my banking app because I genuinely believed there had to be some mistake. There wasn't. Years earlier, when I was still in college, Dad had persuaded me to let him retain emergency access to one of my credit accounts. He had framed it as protection. If something happened to me, he could help. If the family had a real emergency, we would have options. Apparently, Erica needing premium hotel rooms and cocktails now qualified. The charges told the entire story. A luxury suite, expensive dinners, poolside drinks, car services, matching shirts, a nightclub bill that somehow cost more than 1 month of groceries. There were flights and deposits and miscellaneous expenses I couldn't even identify. I sat in the back seat of my ride home, scrolling through charge after charge while my graduation cap rested beside me. They had skipped my ceremony to celebrate Erica, and they had partially financed the celebration with my credit. Something inside me became very quiet. I didn't call anyone. Calling would have meant arguing, and arguing would have invited them to explain why I was unreasonable. Instead, I opened the account controls and froze the card. I marked every transaction I had not personally authorized and changed the login credentials. I removed linked devices, secondary access, saved payment methods, and anything else that could be used without me knowing. Then I changed the passwords on the family streaming accounts I paid for. After that came the shared cloud storage, music subscription, and digital purchases. I wasn't screaming. I wasn't crying. I was simply discovering how many parts of their comfort had quietly been resting on my wallet. The consequences arrived faster than I expected. Erica messaged first. "Seriously? The hotel froze the deposit. We had to move rooms." Then Ryan. "Dinner got canceled because they needed another card. Everyone is pissed." My mother left 3 voicemails. My father left 1. His was 17 seconds long. "Brianna, this has gone far enough. Fix the account immediately. You are humiliating this family." I listened to it twice, not because it hurt, but because I could not believe the irony. Somehow my empty graduation chair had not humiliated anyone. Losing access to a Vegas suite had. When Ryan finally texted, "What is your problem?" I answered him because for once I wanted the sentence recorded somewhere. "You missed my graduation and charged me for the trip you chose instead." He replied almost instantly, "Nobody chose anything over you. Stop making everything personal." I stared at those words for a long time. That was when I understood the real problem. They genuinely believed their choices existed separately from their consequences. Hurting me was accidental. Inconveniencing them was cruelty. That evening, I started cutting the remaining cords. My phone number was still sitting on a family plan controlled by Dad, so I moved it. My car insurance was bundled with theirs, so I separated it. It cost me more. But when the confirmation email arrived, I felt strangely relieved. Every shared account had always been described as convenience, yet suddenly I could see how convenience had become leverage. They could reach into my finances because family trusted family. They could control access because it was easier. They could assume I would absorb expenses because I always had. By the next morning, there was almost nothing left connecting us financially. That was when Dad's tone finally changed. His newest voicemail was quieter. "Your mother's credit could be affected by these disputes. You need to call me." No insult this time. No command to stop being childish. There was fear beneath his voice. For years, I had mistaken their dependence on me for appreciation. Now that I had stepped away, I could finally tell the difference. My cousin Julia texted shortly afterward. "Just so you know, they're losing their minds in the family chat. Erica says you're financially abusing them." I actually laughed. I was sitting on the floor between moving boxes, still packing the apartment I planned to leave after graduation, and that sentence broke whatever sadness remained in me. I hadn't taken anything from them. I had simply stopped letting them take from me. For the first time since walking across that stage, the empty chair didn't feel like proof that nobody had shown up for me. My friends had shown up. I had shown up. The only people missing were the ones who had spent years teaching me that my achievements mattered less than keeping everyone else comfortable. And now, their comfort had expired. 2 weeks passed without anyone in my family contacting me directly. The silence felt strange at first because I had spent most of my life measuring their moods through constant messages, group chats, shared calendars, and those little digital reminders that made it impossible to forget I was connected to them. Now my phone stayed quiet. No lectures from Dad, no wounded paragraphs from Mom, no sarcastic comments from Erica. Even Ryan stopped sending me screenshots from the family group chat. I figured they were waiting for me to feel guilty enough to come back on my own. That was how things usually worked. Someone hurt me. I pulled away. Everyone waited, and eventually I apologized for making things uncomfortable. This time, though, I was sleeping better than I had in months. Then an envelope arrived with Erica's name embossed across the back, and I knew immediately what it was. Her wedding invitation was expensive, thick, and carefully designed in pale cream and gold. Erica and Matthew were getting married in August at a large venue near Lake Tahoe. There was a rehearsal dinner, a welcome cocktail party, a ceremony overlooking the water, and a brunch the following morning. "Family only for the rehearsal dinner," the card said. "Please RSVP before July 1st. I almost laughed at that line. Apparently, I was family again when there were photographs to take. Then I noticed a second envelope tucked behind the invitation. Inside was a printed spreadsheet showing what they claimed I still owed from Vegas. After the disputed charges were removed, the total had dropped to $1,826. Beneath it, Erica had written in blue ink, "Let's not make this weird before the wedding." I sat at my kitchen table holding that paper, genuinely amazed at the confidence required to send it. They still believed the problem was my unpaid contribution. Not the empty seat at graduation. Not the unauthorized charges. Not the fact that my father had kept access to my account without telling me how it was being used. Somewhere in their version of the story, I had become the difficult sister who had thrown a tantrum over money. I looked at the RSVP card, checked the box beside "Declines with regret," and mailed it back that afternoon. But before I sealed the envelope, I opened the hotel reservation page listed on the wedding website and booked myself a room for the same weekend. I wasn't going to the wedding. I wasn't going to the rehearsal dinner. I wasn't planning some dramatic interruption during the vows. I simply wanted to be there long enough for them to understand something they had never understood before. My absence was now a choice, not something they controlled. A few days later, I contacted the hotel and the venue anonymously. I didn't accuse Erica of anything criminal, and I didn't exaggerate. I simply said a recent family event had involved disputed charges on a card whose owner had not authorized its use, and that they might want to verify payment information carefully. That was all. No threats. No demand that they cancel anything. Just enough truth to make people pay attention. Then I did something I debated for nearly an hour. Matthew deserved to know what had actually happened in Vegas. Erica had apparently told him everyone had split the costs. So I created a separate email address and sent him copies of the relevant transaction dates, the disputed charges, and the payment request my father had sent me after graduation. I wrote one sentence beneath them. "Before you marry into this, you should know how the weekend was paid for." I expected nothing to happen. Instead, Erica called me the next evening from a number I hadn't blocked yet. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. The moment I answered, she said, "What did you tell Matthew?" There was no hello, no pretending. Her voice sounded tight, almost breathless. I leaned against the kitchen counter and said, "The truth." She exploded. "You had no right to drag him into this." I asked her, "Did he know Dad used my card?" Silence. Then she said it was complicated, that Dad had planned to reimburse everything, that everyone assumed I would help because I was family. "You weren't even there," I said. "Exactly," she snapped, as if that somehow supported her argument. "You weren't there, so why are you acting like we stole something from you?" I remember looking around my apartment because I needed something physical to anchor me. "Because you did," I said. Then I hung up. By the week of the wedding, I had almost convinced myself I wouldn't go to Tahoe at all. My friends thought staying home would be healthier. One of them told me, "You already made your point. Don't turn yourself into a spectator at your own family disaster." She was probably right. But there was one thing I needed to see with my own eyes. I needed to know whether I could stand 10 feet from them without shrinking back into the version of myself they expected. So I drove up the afternoon before the ceremony, checked into the hotel under my own reservation, and carried one small bag upstairs. No shared booking, no family discount, no card anyone else could touch. That tiny detail mattered more than I expected. That evening, I walked through the lobby on my way to meet friends who happened to be nearby for the weekend. Near the front desk, Matthew's mother was arguing politely with an employee about extra room keys. Several wedding guests were gathered around the elevators with garment bags and champagne boxes. Then the doors opened, and Erica stepped out beside Matthew. She saw me immediately. Her whole body seemed to pause before her face caught up. Matthew glanced toward me, then toward her. I kept walking. No smile, no wave, no confrontation. I simply tapped my keycard against the elevator reader and passed them as though we were strangers sharing the same hotel. An hour later, while I was across town playing pool with friends, my phone started vibrating. First Erica, then Mom, then Dad, then a number I didn't recognize. I ignored all of them. When I finally checked my messages after midnight, Matthew had left one voicemail. His voice was controlled but exhausted. "Bree, I saw what you sent. I talked to Erica. I'm not saying you're wrong, but tomorrow is our wedding. Whatever happens after that, please don't make tomorrow worse." I listened twice. What struck me wasn't anger. It was that he believed I might actually sabotage the ceremony. That told me exactly how Erica had described me. I didn't touch the wedding. I didn't need to. The next morning, rumors were already moving through the hotel. One of Erica's bridesmaids had apparently learned about the disputed card from Matthew. Another guest knew someone who had been in Vegas and confirmed that Dad had been the one handling most of the payments. Before noon, one of Erica's closest friends messaged me privately. She wrote, "I genuinely didn't know your family skipped your graduation for that weekend." Then, 10 minutes later, she sent me money covering one of the charges associated with her hotel share. I hadn't asked for it. She said she felt sick knowing how the trip had been funded. That was the moment the family version of events started collapsing, because once one person outside the family understood what really happened, everyone else began asking questions. The wedding still happened. Erica posted a picture later that afternoon with Matthew beneath an arch overlooking the lake. Her caption said something about protecting your joy from negativity. Comments were limited. 2 bridesmaids who had originally been part of the full weekend left early. The following morning's brunch was quietly downsized. I heard all of this secondhand because I spent the wedding itself hiking with my friends, eating burgers afterward and refusing to check my phone. When I returned to the hotel that night, Erica was waiting near the elevators. She looked exhausted, mascara slightly smudged, still wearing part of her reception hairstyle. "Are you happy?" she asked me. I stopped several feet away. "About what?" "You poisoned everything." I thought about answering angrily, but the anger wasn't there anymore. "If one truthful email can poison your wedding," I said, "maybe I wasn't the poison." Her face changed. For half a second, she looked like she might cry. Then she turned away. 2 weeks after the wedding, I finally told the story publicly. I used a throwaway account and changed enough identifying details that strangers wouldn't immediately know who we were. I wrote about graduation, Vegas, the payment request, the frozen card, the invoice attached to the wedding invitation, and the fact that everyone still seemed more offended by my reaction than by what had happened. The story spread farther than I expected. Thousands of comments appeared within a day. Some people thought I had gone too far. Most couldn't understand why my family had expected me to pay for a trip that replaced my graduation. I didn't care about winning public approval. What mattered was that for the first time, I saw my family dynamic described by people who had no reason to protect anyone. Then, things became messy in ways I hadn't predicted. Erica had just started working at a new real estate firm, and apparently someone there recognized enough details to connect the story. Ryan had been preparing applications for graduate programs and became terrified that the family drama would somehow follow him. My parents blamed me for both. Dad left a voicemail saying, "You're damaging people's futures over one mistake." One mistake. That phrase stayed with me. Missing graduation was one mistake. Using my card was another. Sending the invoice was another. Calling me selfish was another. Demanding silence was another. Somehow, when stacked together, they were still being marketed as one small misunderstanding. Mom eventually mailed me a handwritten letter. She said the family was falling apart. She said Erica's first months of marriage had been overshadowed by suspicion. Ryan barely spoke at home, and Dad had become obsessed with the financial investigation. She asked me to stop before more damage is done. I read that line repeatedly because it sounded so familiar. More damage, as though damage had begun the moment I stopped cooperating. There was no sentence saying, "We should have been at your graduation." No sentence saying, "We should never have used your account." No sentence saying, "You deserved better." The entire letter was about consequences. That was when I finally knew what I wanted. Not revenge, not humiliation, not even an apology anymore. I wanted the last physical thing that still represented their access to me. The original card my father had kept all those years. I knew exactly where it probably was, in the kitchen drawer at my parents' house, where spare keys, stamps, batteries, and important odds and ends had always been kept. Thanksgiving was coming. I hadn't been invited. Ryan quietly forwarded me the group message anyway. So I decided I would go. Not to eat, not to argue, just to take back what was mine. Thanksgiving arrived colder than I expected, the kind of gray afternoon where every house on my parents' street looked warm from the outside. I parked 2 houses down because the driveway was full and sat behind the wheel for almost 5 minutes without moving. Through the living room window, I could see familiar shapes crossing back and forth, people carrying plates, someone leaning over the dining table, my father disappearing toward the kitchen. For years, that house had been the place I automatically returned to, no matter how frustrated I was. Birthdays, holidays, Sunday dinners, arguments that ended with everyone pretending nothing happened. This time, I wasn't coming home. I was retrieving something. That distinction was the only reason I opened the car door. I wore a black sweater, dark jeans, and no expression I had to practice. I didn't bring wine. I didn't bring dessert. I didn't bring an apology. When I opened the front door, conversation stopped so quickly I could hear the television running in the den. Mom was standing by the kitchen island holding a serving spoon. Dad had been pouring wine. Erica sat beside Matthew at the dining table, and Ryan was across from them with his phone face down beside his plate. Nobody had saved me a chair. Oddly enough, seeing that didn't hurt anymore. Erica's eyes narrowed first. "What are you doing here?" she asked. Mom whispered my name like I had appeared after being declared missing. Ryan looked from me to Dad but said nothing. I closed the door behind me and stayed near the entryway. "I'm not staying," I said. "I need the original card Dad kept." There was a long silence. Dad's jaw tightened. "You came here on Thanksgiving for a credit card." "Yes." He looked almost offended by how simple my answer was. Mom set down the spoon and stepped toward me. "Bri, please, if you came all this way, at least sit down. We can talk like adults." That phrase used to work on me because talk like adults always meant sitting through an hour of explanations until I became too exhausted to defend myself. I shook my head. "I didn't come to discuss Vegas." Erica gave a sharp laugh. "Of course you didn't. You prefer discussing it with strangers online." Matthew looked down at his plate. I could see tension in his shoulders before Erica even finished speaking. For a second, the old instinct returned the need to justify everything, to explain exactly what I had posted and what I hadn't, to prove I wasn't some vindictive lunatic. Then I remembered I didn't need their verdict anymore. "The card," I repeated. Dad stared at me for several seconds before pushing away from the counter. Without another word, he walked to the kitchen drawer beside the microwave. The same drawer I remembered from childhood. Stuffed with spare batteries, expired coupons, scissors, birthday candles, and keys nobody could identify anymore. He pulled it open, moved a few things around, and took out a card with my name printed across the front. Seeing it in his hand made my stomach tighten. The account had already been locked down. The card itself was useless. But there it was anyway, sitting in their house as though some small piece of my financial life had always belonged there. Dad walked toward me and held it out. "Happy?" he asked quietly. I took it without answering. Erica couldn't leave it alone. "This is insane," she said. "You destroyed months of our lives, embarrassed me at my own wedding, caused problems at work, and now you show up here like you're the victim collecting evidence." Matthew finally said, "Erica, stop." She turned on him immediately. "No, I'm tired of everyone acting like she's some hero because she graduated and we went to Vegas." I felt something inside me settle when she said it that way. Because there it was. Even after everything, my graduation and her Vegas weekend still occupied equal weight in her mind, like two unfortunate scheduling conflicts rather than a choice the family had made. I slipped the card into my coat pocket. "You're right about one thing," I said. "I'm not a victim anymore." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "Then what do you want from us?" she asked. For months, I had imagined that question and invented speeches for it. In some versions, I yelled. In others, I listed every birthday Erica had overshadowed, every emergency Ryan had caused, every time my parents had asked me to be understanding because I was the responsible one. But standing there, none of that felt necessary. "Nothing," I said. Mom flinched. I looked at Dad, then Erica, then Ryan. "That's the part none of you understand. I don't want money. I don't want an apology you have to be forced into. I don't want you punished. I just don't want to be the person you automatically charge whenever somebody else wants something. Dad's face hardened. We made a mistake. You made a choice, I said. A mistake is writing the wrong date on a check. You knew my graduation date. You chose Erica's trip anyway. Then you used my account. Then you sent me a bill afterward. Mom started to say that they had always planned to celebrate with me later, but I stopped her. My voice never rose. You chose her. You've chosen her plenty of times. You choose Ryan whenever he needs rescuing. That's your right. But you don't get to finance those choices with my future, and then call me selfish when I notice. Nobody answered. Even Erica went quiet. I think calmness frightened them more than anger would have, because anger could have been dismissed as another tantrum. Calm meant I had already finished deciding. I turned toward the door. Mom said, "Brianna," and there was something in her voice that nearly stopped me. Not manipulation exactly. More like grief arriving too late. I rested my hand on the doorknob without looking back. "I hope dinner is good," I said. Then I walked outside. The cold hit my face, and I expected to fall apart when I reached the car. Instead, I sat down, took the card from my pocket, and looked at it once before cutting it through the magnetic strip with the small scissors on my keychain. I dropped the pieces into a gas station trash can 10 minutes later. That was it. No police, no dramatic confrontation on the lawn, no screaming through the window, just 2 pieces of plastic at the bottom of a trash bag. I spent Thanksgiving at my friend Chloe's apartment with 4 people who had been at my graduation. We ordered enough takeout for twice as many people, argued over which movie to watch, played games until nearly 3 in the morning, and laughed so hard at one point that someone spilled soda across the coffee table. Nobody asked me to tell the story again. Nobody made me explain why I wasn't with my parents. Chloe's mother called halfway through the night and insisted everyone say hello on speakerphone. Before hanging up, she said, "Bree, congratulations again, by the way. We're still proud of you." It had been months since graduation, and somehow that casual sentence almost broke me more than anything my family had done. She remembered without needing anything from me. I didn't speak to my parents after Thanksgiving. The first month felt unnatural because silence had always been used as punishment in my family, and some part of me kept waiting for someone to end it. Christmas passed. Then New Year's. Erica sent nothing. Ryan sent nothing. My parents sent nothing. In January, Erica forwarded me a podcast episode about repairing damaged family relationships. There was no message attached, just a link. I stared at it for a moment, then forwarded it to Chloe with the subject line, "Apparently homework has been assigned." She replied with a laughing emoji and asked if I wanted tacos. I never opened the podcast. Then, about 4.5 months after Thanksgiving, an email appeared from a nonprofit organization I barely remembered applying to. I had sent them my resume almost a year earlier while finishing school, back when I was applying everywhere and imagining I might have to accept whatever came first. They had kept my information and now had an opening in community outreach and event coordination. The salary wasn't spectacular. The title wasn't impressive, but the interview felt different from every corporate conversation I had suffered through. They asked why I cared about the work. They talked about people rather than performance metrics. When they offered me the position, I said yes before I could overthink it. 2 weeks later, I left the city where I had grown up. My new apartment was on the 2nd floor of an old building with uneven hardwood and stairs that complained every time I climbed them. The kitchen was barely large enough for 2 people, and 1 bedroom window stuck whenever it rained. I loved it immediately. The lease had only my name. The electricity was mine. The internet was mine. The insurance was mine. Nobody had emergency access. Nobody had a spare key hidden in a drawer somewhere. On my first night, I sat on the living room floor eating noodles out of the carton because my furniture hadn't arrived yet, and I realized I had never experienced that kind of quiet before. It wasn't the silence people use to punish you. It was peace. The job wasn't glamorous either. But I stopped dreading Mondays. I organized neighborhood events, coordinated volunteers, answered too many emails, and spent afternoons talking with people whose lives were messier than anything I had ever experienced. Nobody there cared that my sister had gotten married in Tahoe. Nobody knew my parents. Nobody introduced me as Erica's younger sister, or the dependable daughter, or the one who could always cover an expense. I was simply Bree. Some days I came home exhausted, but it was a clean exhaustion, the kind that came from actually doing something instead of constantly managing someone else's expectations. News about my family reached me occasionally through cousins. Erica stayed married to Matthew, although apparently the first year was rough. Ryan changed direction and enrolled in paralegal courses instead of the graduate program he had talked about for years, describing it online as a strategic pivot. Dad stopped discussing the disputed charges. Mom stopped posting large family photo albums every weekend. For a while, I caught myself checking their pages out of habit. Then the habit faded. One day, I realized I hadn't looked in nearly a month, and that felt more important than blocking anyone ever had. I still miss them sometimes. That was the part I hadn't expected. Freedom didn't erase memory. A candle in a grocery aisle would smell exactly like the ones Mom burned every December. A man laughing in a restaurant would sound enough like Dad that I would turn around automatically. Sometimes, I remembered Erica teaching me to braid my hair when we were kids, before everything became a competition I hadn't agreed to enter. Those memories didn't prove I had made the wrong decision. They proved that people could hurt you without every moment with them having been terrible. I eventually learned I didn't need to rewrite my childhood into a horror story to justify leaving the parts that were destroying me. The people who stayed made that lesson easier. The friends who screamed my name at graduation helped me move, called without needing favors, and invited me into their families without treating it like charity. 2 of them drove several hours one weekend just to visit my new apartment. We ate cheap pizza on the floor, explored downtown, and took a ridiculous picture in front of my building. Looking at that photo later, I thought about the picture I had posted after graduation. Family is who shows up. Back then, I had written it while angry. Now I finally understood it without anger. There was never a cinematic reunion with my parents. No surprise knock on the door. No tearful apology that repaired everything. Maybe someday we will speak again. Maybe we won't. I stopped needing to know. They had spent years teaching me that being family meant enduring anything because the connection could never be broken. What I eventually learned was almost the opposite. Some relationships survive because people care for them. Others survive only because one person keeps sacrificing enough to prevent the cracks from showing. My family didn't collapse because I walked away. It had been fractured long before my graduation. I was simply the person who stopped holding the pieces together with my money, my time, and my silence. And once I stopped, I discovered something I wish I had understood much earlier. Walking away from a broken structure isn't the same as destroying it. Sometimes, it's just the first moment you finally stop standing underneath it.